Okay, so I was teaching 7th grade math at Rossville Junior Senior High School. Came over the announcements. At the time, we had a thing called Channel 1 TV. So all our rooms had a TV, and back in the day, that would have been pretty special to have. Our principal got on the intercom and said that the first tower had been hit. Didn't know what it was, and we were welcome to put that on our TV. So I remember turning on the TV as my 7th graders watched. Had about 27 or 28 of them, and we actually watched the second plane hit the tower. Pretty dramatic for not just myself, but especially for the kids. And then after that, we shut it off as there was footage that was probably inappropriate for students to see at the time. A bunch of us teachers at our lunch break, we did go out and pray around the flagpole for the lives lost on that day, and impacted. My family was huge, just because we had a lot of friends that were first responders, and just how your heart could break for those people that run into the trouble and risk life and limb to save somebody else. So one cool thing that I do remember from the day, all air traffic was shut down. I do know that, and we were over at some friends of our house, just kind of replaying the day, and we saw Air Force One fly over Indiana, which was pretty neat. And I don't know if you know the story of 9/11, but Air Force One was also another target of the terrorist attack. So it's kind of neat to see Air Force One with the F-16s escorting them over Indiana before it went back to Washington, D.C. Just 9/11, throughout the years. I mean, obviously this is the 20th anniversary, and just seems like every year it makes a bigger impact on just the people that sacrificed and what they gave for other people is just awesome.
I'm Dottie Summers. I'm the librarian at Pioneer High School. September 11th, that day, I was presently a school bus driver, and I had come home from my route not knowing anything that had happened. I always turn on the news to catch what's going on, and I saw that, and I was just in shock. I was just so sad, and I couldn't believe that something like that was happening in America. After realizing how many people had lost their lives, I got to thinking about how life is short. I, at that time, had not been speaking to my parents for about 3 months, and I'm sure it was over something stupid, but we all get something in our head that we want our way. But that day, September 11th, I called my mom and dad, and I said, I'm sorry, and I love you, and life is short, and I don't want one more day to go by without me telling you that, because we don't have a promise of tomorrow. We only have the promise of this immediate time.
9/11. My sister had a shop uptown, and I was up there watching the shop, and I had my youngest daughter with me, and the TV was on, and the news, it interrupted the show. I don't know, we were probably watching a kid's show, and the news popped on, and we sat and finished watching the planes hit the buildings. And she called me the other day, and she's like, I was watching a documentary about 9/11, and she says, I don't remember watching the plane hit the building. I'm like, you watched it. But she says, Mom, they didn't stop. They never slowed down. Nope. They ran right into it. It really impacted her class. A lot of them joined the service because of it. It had such an impact on the whole country. Everybody, there were flags everywhere. The country came together. It was devastating, but it was pretty awesome to watch the country come together.
Hello, my name is Miss Wers. For those of you who don't know me, I teach 10th grade geography and 12th grade government in one section of freshman PE. I work with the cross-country team, I lead FCS, and I work with student council. I was only 3 when 9/11 happened. I was born in 1998, so I do not exactly remember what I was doing But my mom has shared with me that she had just dropped me and my brother off at preschool, kindergarten, and had come home to just watch the news, like the Today Show. And she remembered she was just sitting there folding clothes, and her sister called her, and they just sat there and watched the news for the rest of the day. I remember learning about 9/11 just as a kid, you know, in school. And I remember other tragedies, just other American tragedies happening that are on a smaller scale, but I could tell you exactly where I was and what I was doing when those occurred, like the Boston Marathon bombings. So to see and to know of such a tragedy that happened in America 20 years ago, and know so many people who were alive during that time, and hear their stories is something that is just, I think, helps our students who were not alive in 2001 at all understand the importance and how terrible that day was. And I put a quote in my room today, September 10th. We're talking about 9/11 in my class all day today, on my board, and it said, "This is one of the worst days in American history," and it really was. And as I've gotten older, more mature, this day and whenever it comes around, it started to affect me. I don't know anyone who died personally in 9/11, but these different times in American history have started to really affect me, because we are so blessed to live in a country that is free and has liberties, and to see someone who hates that so much and wants to take that away from people really affects me. So I think it's very important to teach my students why we should value our liberty, why we should value our freedom, and I think it's important that they understand why people want to take that away or why they don't like it. So it's my goal. Today we usually watch some videos. We see the towers collapse. I show that to my students. And then the past year and then this year, my second year teaching, I have each of my students write a letter to either a New York City police officer or a New York City fire department member. And I send it to the nearest police station and the nearest fire station to the One World Trade Center. And I just have them focus on being grateful, being thankful to those who did lose their lives and were so courageous on that day. It's very humbling to watch things about that day. People had no idea what was occurring, and it really changed America over the last 20 years. And I just hope and pray that none of our students have to live through a time like that. And it's an important day to remember. So many people were very courageous.
Hi, I'm Kelly Colmar, and I'm a teacher at Pioneer Junior Senior High School, and I remember the original 9/11 in 2001. I was in college at IUK, and I went to an early morning 8 o'clock class, and as soon as I got to my class, my professor told us that class was canceled and that we should go to the cafeteria to watch what was happening on the big screen. And so when I got to the cafeteria, everyone was there, and we watched it live. And it was very impactful. In fact, it was also uncensored. We got to see, everything, the planes flying into the World Trade Center, and we even saw people jumping out of the windows, which is something you can't find in the footage today. It was uncensored at the time. And I just remember feeling very sad. And when I went home and went to talk to my roommate, I found her on the couch with like 2 empty boxes of Kleenexes. She'd been crying all morning. The rest of my friends at the time decided that they were going to try to raise money to help people and the injured firefighters and things like that. And that's how it went down for me. Another interesting effect from the 9/11 from 2001 is the plane that was brought down by the passengers and their heroic acts to keep it from flying into something else important. One of those passengers' name was Todd Beamer, and an interesting thing about that is in Seattle, Washington, where my stepson went to school, they started a brand new high school and named it after Todd Beamer. So my stepson went to Todd Beamer High School in Seattle, Washington, and I thought that was a good effort to immortalize the heroes from that day.
My name is Mr. Williams. I'm Zach Williams, and 9/11 happened when I was 3 years old, so my story is not as in detail as others. I remember being frustrated because I was 3 years old and I was like watching, we were getting ready for preschool, and I was like watching Winnie the Pooh or Thomas the Tank Engine, I don't remember. And I remember being frustrated when my dad had called home and was like, turn on the news. And so we watched the second plane hit the tower, and at the time I didn't understand it. I just saw a plane hitting a building. And then as I got older and I learned more about this event, more information came out. I'm from North Aurora, Illinois, and the next town over is a little town called Batavia, Illinois, which contains, at the time, there was only one of the two particle accelerator rings called Fermilab. And so there was a lot of fear around that time that this was also going to be a place of attack, because if that was attacked and that exploded, it would be not good, especially when those rings were active. My father is a pharmacist, and he was also involved with in the secondary anthrax scare. He was called to Argonne it's in the middle of nowhere, Illinois. It's a little medical research facility, and so he was called to Argonne to work with how to combat an anthrax and other biological attacks. And then the only other story that I really know about is my mom's cousin was in the Pentagon when it happened, and he described it as he didn't really quite know what was going on because they were so far down into the Pentagon that he didn't quite understand it until he got up and went, oh, we got crashed into by a plane. And then as more information came out, it became really clear that this is not okay. My takeaway from that is I'm extremely thankful for our active service members that went and fought and bled and died for this country, as well as the first responders who put themselves in harm's way and did miracles and saved a ton of people that wouldn't be here.
Hey, my name is Eric Reese, and I teach social studies here at Pioneer Junior Senior High School. And 9/11, how can you forget that? When you think about it, I think that's one of those moments that when it happened, you never forget it. So that morning, Pioneer was doing testing, standard testing that day, and I was kicked out of my classroom to go teach downstairs, because my room was being used as a testing room. So my classroom was downstairs, and I was teaching history, and a fellow teacher came and knocked on my door, and I opened up the door, and the first thing they said, you need to turn on the TV. Now, this is the time that we had TVs mounted on the wall for our Channel 1 broadcasting that we did on a daily basis. So I looked at the teacher, and it was this teacher that was kind of a joker, so I'm like, he didn't take it very serious for what he said, and I said, we're busy, and he goes, Mr. Reese, turn the TV on. And I just kind of looked at him funny. He goes, the World Trade Center had just been attacked. And again, not sure how serious to take it because this teacher was just one of those jokesters. So finally, he gave me that look like, okay, maybe I better listen to him this time. So I turned the TV on, and all I can remember is my jaw just dropped, and I just stared at the TV, and I was like, oh dear. So we saw the first building had already gotten hit by the first plane, and then we actually saw the second plane hit the second building. So the entire class was just completely quiet. We all just kind of sat there and just stared at the news, just mesmerized, like, in disbelief that something like this was actually happening to the United States. Definitely a scary moment, definitely a moment that I don't think I'll ever forget. My wife was on her way to Indianapolis for a conference, and I remember getting a call between classes from her saying that once she got to Indianapolis that they had turned everybody away and said, go back home. So, and pretty much the rest of the day, I think everything was just shut down, and we all, school was dismissed early that day, and we all went home and just kind of reflected. And I think everybody's, eyes were on the TV for the rest of the day to find out exactly what had happened, and then we just continued to hear on all the other episodes that were happening as we term as 9/11 today.
I am Tawny Martin, Miss Martin to most people. I teach English here at Pioneer. I was a freshman in college when 9/11 happened, and I was in psychology class. We didn't know much about it until we got home, back to the dorm, and I remember walking into the lobby of my dorm and seeing just the smoke and the towers on the TV screen. And I still at that point had no idea what was going on. And so from that point, I went upstairs to my room, and for the rest of the day, once we figured out what had actually happened, I sat and watched the news with some of my friends from college, and we just kind of talked about things and you know, shared our feelings and the sadness that we were feeling, and it was very overwhelming. And I remember it being the first time that I realized the destruction that just a couple of minutes or a short period of time, or you know, a smaller, certain group of people could cause, because I hadn't seen anything like that before. And I think it still took a couple of weeks to figure out the severity of what had happened, and to make sense of it, and to just really have a grasp of how the world was going to change, and how, you know, life-changing it was going to be for everyone. And I think that the tragedy brought the country closer. I think that we kind of, you know, we all kind of rallied together and decided, you know, how we could support each other. And I think that is an unfortunate situation that caused that to happen. And I will remember, you know, the smoke, the what I saw on the TV for probably the rest of my life. And even though it was such a tragedy, I do feel that being able to experience that sort of a tragedy during my lifetime, at a time where I could remember it and make sense of it, has helped me look at things from different perspectives, and truly also show gratitude to those who, you know, were on the front lines, and who were, you know, whether it's the firefighters or the, you know, people who went overseas afterwards, or whomever it might be. I just remember it being a sad day, but like I said, I also remember learning a lot from it and becoming more knowledgeable about things that I probably should have been knowledgeable about prior to that experience.
Will do. I'm Deborah Butler. I'm the school nurse at Pioneer Junior Senior High School. I graduated from here in 1975. I joined the Air Force in 1984, and I worked as a nurse while in the Air Force for 26 years. I was stationed at Elmendorf Air Force Base in Anchorage, Alaska, when 9/11 happened. Because the time is 4 hours different than the East Coast, we were not aware of the event, most of us, until we drove to work that morning. So I was on my way to work at about 6:30 or 7 o'clock, and most of 9/11 had already happened. We just weren't aware of it. I don't remember the exact time all of those events happened, because it all seemed like it happened at the same time to us, because we found out about it on our way to work. When we got to work, the base was in what we call lockdown, which meant that no airframe, helicopters, cargo planes, fighter planes, nothing left the ground. And then subsequently, all of us were called into our duty sections to be available in the event there was action that needed to be taken. Of course, this is a hospital, and we already had surgeries scheduled for the day. We already had ladies in labor that had to be delivered, so we had to go about our business, and we could only get snatches of what happened. And none of it was very real to us at that time. It became real later on, as I talked with my friends, I talked with my pilot friend in Texas, and the B-1 bombers were all on lockdown. Nothing was flying at Dyess Air Force Base in Texas. And in the weeks later, after that, one of my dear friends, who was stationed at Dover Air Force Base, she and her nurses were taken away from their primary jobs, which was working in the clinics and taking care of patients. They were pulled over to Dover Air Force Base in the mortuary. Dover Air Force Base is the Air Force's mortuary, and most of the casualties in the military come in from overseas combat locations when they've expired, and they go through Dover Air Force Base mortuary on their way back to their loved ones. My friend Kathy and her nurses worked for several months identifying the remains that they found in the Twin Towers and the Pentagon. She said it was a very difficult job because, of course, when people are in airframe crashes or crashes in big buildings like our countrymen were, they're like water balloons, and pretty much everything that's not a bone or a tooth fades away. And it takes a long time for rescuers to get to people that are caught in collapsed buildings or in airplane crashes like that sometimes. So they only got to identify the remains by their teeth and what personal belongings were left that survived the bombing. It was scary. It was very sad for us because we could only see the pictures, the horrific pictures of the towers coming down around us. And it changed the world for us forever, like many people. And that's about all I have to say. It's scary to me to think that an enemy can hit so close within our boundaries because we are generally very secure. It becomes startlingly real when you're in another country that the world is very different outside our known borders. To me, I thought the world was very safe when I grew up in Royal Center, Indiana. My world wasn't very large. But when I joined the Air Force, I was stationed in Korea. I've been to France and Spain and Italy and Russia. And I've discovered how very different life is in different kinds of societies. And it's very scary to me to think that an enemy can strike so close to our heartland and strike such a devastating blow. And we've been in Afghanistan, in that area, for over 20 years now, because I was on active duty also during Desert Shield and Desert Storm. So it's a scary place. It's not very stable, and sometimes we forget that their culture is not like ours, and that makes it even more difficult to plan and react without creating more problems.